Okay, we're coming back from a water break. David, what were you saying?
Womanizer, you know. There's this mythology surrounding certain people in my family, and my grandfather's one of them. My grandfather allegedly was dating a girl when he was a teenager and dumped her for her mother. And dated the mother for like 3 months, 4 months. Like, slept with her while the daughter was in the other room. Crazy stories like dating his teacher when he was like 16, I think.
Wow.
Womanizer, cheated on my grandmother. My grandmother knew everything. We all knew my grandfather was a womanizer, and as he got old, things must have stopped working as well, and then a little miracle drug called Viagra comes along. After my grandmother passes away, goes right back to living as a bachelor, because his brother was a widower, his younger brother, and they start going out on the town together with their shirts unbuttoned, polyester shirts unbuttoned down to their chest, chains and rings, thinking they're hot shit, and god damn it, they got action, like, nothing. I'd probably, attractive older women, reasonably for them, like, they thought they were hot, and I'd come home and my grandfather would have a date, and, he was dating frequently, and doctor told him, you have to stop living like you're 20, Vladimir, you're living like you're still out on the town, a young man. You have to stop this lifestyle, you have to cut down on cholesterol, you have to stop smoking, you have to this, you have to that. Supposedly he said he gave up the Viagra because it made his heart beat too quickly, but eventually he was having many strokes, and the doctor said this is a sign of a serious stroke to come. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in a year. You have to stop smoking immediately, you have to follow all these rules, you have to stop eating fatty stuff, and sure enough, the major stroke came, and he's essentially the mind's 80% there, like, he doesn't understand stuff as well as he used to, but still grasps things pretty well, but he's essentially giving up because he's gone through so much. He's learned how to walk again twice. Like, when he was living in New York with my grandma and my mom and uncle, he was in a car accident where he was walking in two cars. A car crashed into him and pinned him against another car and basically crushed his pelvis. And he had to go into surgery and get tons of operations on his legs, and was in a body cast for a while. Had to learn to walk all over again, and his force of will was so big that in 6 months he was on crutches. And officer buddy of the family that knew my grandfather caught him driving down the street in the car with the crutches because he was still in the body cast, like his legs were still wrapped up, and he had shifted the car on and used the crutches to hit the brake and the gas, and was driving down the street, and the cop's like, what the hell are you doing, Walter? He's like, well, I want cigarettes. And he took him home, and bought him cigarettes and took him home and said, now stay in bed, Only walk around your house if you have to. That's how strong-willed my grandfather is. Like, he fell out of bed the night he had the stroke because he was trying to get outside so he could go find a cigarette. And the physical therapist said he should have been walking around by now. He could make a full recovery if he wants to, but he doesn't want to anymore. So
you've called your grandpa Vladimir and Walter.
Walter is the English form of Vladimir, Russian. Your
grandfather's Russian.
My family believed in globalization long before it was ever a coined term. My grandfather is Russian Chinese Jew. And my grandmother was Italian, Portuguese, Brazilian. My grandfather's mother, Esfir Georgieff, married a guy named Li Gongfu. Supposedly she was rich, like a Russian heiress or something like that. When she was 16, she was Jewish Russian, and when she was 16, she met a very dashing Taiwanese colonel or major named Li Gongfu, and her family didn't like him, so she ran off with him. and had my grandfather Vladimir, his brother Victor, and his sister Faina. And they had a good life from what I hear, but after a while, Li Gongfu was addicted to opium, and it caused his death. But this is more family mythology. One of the common beliefs in my family for a long time was that they died fleeing, like he died fleeing the communist takeover of China. That he was shot as they were fleeing over the border into Hong Kong, but my grandfather said no, the old man died of opium overdose or something. He had a heart condition and the opium aggravated it.
Yeah.
And she remarried a Russian guy who was fleeing Russia, supposedly, more family mythology. Like, either he was fleeing Russia from the Stalin purges, and he changed his name from whatever it was to Boris Georgieff. Boris something else into Boris Georgieff, or Georgieff in Russian. And met great-grandma Esfir and married her. And, marries her. They're living in Hong Kong for a while. My grandfather is, a young hoodlum on the streets, and after a while, young Alex Georgieff is born. But here's the thing. My grandfather and his sister are pale, like Russian pale.
Mm-hmm.
His brother, Victor, the middle child, looks Chinese, but Alex also looks Chinese. And Boris and great-grandma Esfir were really pale people.
Yeah.
And Alex looks Chinese, and coincidentally, throughout the period where Alex would have been, conceived, so to speak, during that whole time, Grandma was seeing the kindly old Chinese chiropractor down the street, who bears a striking resemblance to Uncle Alex, from what I hear. So we call it the Georgieff gene, the wandering eye and the wandering whatever. The tendency to be somewhat of a hedonist, we call it the Georgieff gene. But as bad as any of the boys were, Faina was the worst from what I hear. Like, my grandfather used to drag her out of things, straight out of, like, Roman flesh festivals. She'd go on benders and he'd have to drive, like, over to the next town to pick her up and stuff like that. Family history is littered with drunken benders or fights or, people. Like, my grandfather was at a barber shop in Brazil and, didn't like his haircut, refused to pay, and he and the barber ended up destroying the entire shop in the brawl that ensued.